Hi there, my name is Sinclair. I'm the CEO and founder of Smartchain from New Zealand, but I am now located here in Houston. Smartchain is fundamentally an oil and gas tech company. I would say at least more than half the people that work for us have something like a decade in the industry. Right? What that allows us to do is speak oil and gas language, right? So we can come in, we can understand your problem straight off the bat. And then offer fast solutions that deploy quickly, that require minimal lift on the customer's part. Where we've chosen to focus our attention is on contract automation. Now, I don't know if anyone in this room has this experience, but it is certainly a common experience, I would say. Executing an oil field contract remains a cumbersome process. There's misaligned incentives, manual processes, errors and delays. Ultimately, this results in significant personnel burden, weak cost visibility, and impacted business processes. I know this all too well. I was a field service manager for SLB in the future life, and I say that I was probably spending 2 or 3 hours every day going through invoices, tickets, making sure everything was right. And inevitably, mistakes were made, right? Because you've got human beings touching thousands and thousands of invoices certainly every month. These are in addition to the just general burden that comes from doing it correctly, there's a significant amount of burden from doing it incorrectly. Inevitably, you have the situation where the OFS company might see one thing one way, and their spreadsheet says, yep, I drilled really fast. And then the operator is sitting there with his spreadsheet saying, no, you didn't drill quite as fast as I thought you did. So what we believe that the solution to be is contract automation. Okay? I'm not going to necessarily go through the ins and outs of this. Make sure to come find me afterwards if you want me to do a deep dive into this solution. But fundamentally what we're doing is we're taking the paper contract, the terms that have already been agreed between the operator and the vendor, digitizing those contracts into a language that the machine can understand. This is typically going to be a series of if and else statements for one of better word. Then we're tying that to known and agreed data sources, right? So think EDR data sources, industry indices, things like that. And then we're allowing those data sources combined with the digital contract terms to actually drive the execution of the contract. So all the way from order fulfillment, ticket review, reconciliation, invoice coding, and approval is all done in a zero-touch, yet highly visible way. And then those results are fed back into the business systems, both on the vendor side and the operator side automatically. The principal value that comes from this is aligned incentives, right? So now you can actually find yourself in a situation where both the operator and the vendor are pulling in the same direction, which, believe it or not, is often not the case. Secondly, you have real-time financial visibility. So no longer does an operator sit there wondering, oh, I wonder how much this is going to cost me, waiting 6 weeks for the invoice to come in. Now you know in real time what your operation costs. On the same side for the vendor knows what they are going to be able to charge as they see their invoice being prepared in front of them based on the agreed single source of truth. Keeping with my story from before, you've got the ability to eliminate leakage and administration tasks. I'm not necessarily suggesting that there is any nefarious intent. I'm sure that exists out there. Honestly, we have not seen an awful lot of that, but we have just seen a lot of human error, right? That is to say, I missed a line on an invoice, or I invoiced the person twice and it wasn't spotted. Those kinds of things, they just happen. We started with those top three. We thought we're going to go to market with that as our value proposition. However, we've discovered value proposition number 4, which is the ability to actually QC the data in real time. Because we're using this data to drive contracts, all of a sudden the impetus to make sure that that data is accurate in real time goes through the roof. So that's what we're going to focus on here today. Over here you see an illustration of the data lifecycle. Now, everyone here has seen much more complicated versions of this today. I'm not suggesting anything new. I'm not taking this as a grand insight, but fundamentally, trash in, trash out is a lesson that we learn time and time again. And you've got all these great solutions, all these great insights that can come from AI that are possible, as you can see over here at the left end of the slide. But it's just not possible if you're feeding garbage data, okay? The reality is that in our industry, a lot of that data doesn't necessarily come from your organization, it's going to come from your stakeholders. right? So you've got an operator on site, he's working with a drilling company, he's got service companies, they're all supplying data. And some of those guys, they're tired, they're working hard, they're not necessarily motivated to deliver the highest quality data they can. They're out there to drill a hole or fracture a hole, whatever their service is, and then get out of there so they can get on to the next job. So they're going to give you what you need in order for them to get paid. And let's be honest, that's about it. I'm not necessarily suggesting that they're bad, but they're just not necessarily incentivized to provide you with the highest quality data. On top of that, within your own organization, you've got your tool pushers and your on-site representatives. These guys are working their butt off just to make sure the wells are being drilled and everyone's safe. They're required to input data, or maybe just simply watch the calibration on some sensors. That's a lot of work, and given the fact that they're human beings, they're going to miss things. On top of that, you've got definitions and metrics are fundamentally misaligned. You often have a situation where one operator thinks up is up, and the other one thinks up is down. And then finally, you have data being underutilized, right? You've got a situation where data is created, but it's not fundamentally available. So I'm going to give you 3 quick examples, real-world examples that we've been able to create value for our customers. One is to drive real-time data hygiene. The next one is to enable a standard common truth, and the third is to unlock access to new data sources. So here's number 1. We've got this great quote from Charlie Munger: "Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the outcome." In line with what I said earlier, if you can get to the point where you have these contracts driving real-time execution and being visible to the people that are actually touching the data, there's a lot stronger motivation for them to go back to their system and feed it back in and make those corrections in real time. So when that data is utilized by an AI system, say 3 weeks, 3 months down the line, that data is ready to go. From our current deployments, we've seen something like a 25% drop in the number of errors on daily reports. And for one customer, we actually saw a 99% reduction in mismatches between their financial records and their operational records. Believe it or not, that actually led to about $1 million in savings in that first month. Next one here is talking about enabling a common truth. And I realize this has been spoken about by a number of different presenters today. But it's absolutely critical that we're able to enforce a precise and visible definition of all the key operational metrics, just to make sure that everybody understands and starts pulling the separation. A really good example of this is we were working with a super major and their rig contractor. They were working on having a lateral footage-based performance contract. Figuring out where the level ended, that was easy. Everyone agreed, yep, that's the end of the well, you do pipe tally, you know what it is. But where does the lateral start was a fun conversation. So I went to the super major and said, hey, where does the lateral start? And they said, oh, we asked the rig contractor. So, cool. So I go over to the rig contractor and I say, hey, where does the lateral start? And they say, oh no, we talked to the directional companies. I'm like, okay, great. How many of those? How many are there? And they say, oh, there's 4. So I go to all 4 of them, and I just got an absolute smorgasbord of answers. Right? So you've got this situation where you've got these 4 directional contractors actually driving the contract performance between a rig company and their operator. And that was not good, because that was creating a lot of animosity, there was a lot of disagreements, a lot of consternation happening about, hey, when does this actually start? So the first thing we did was we said, look, this is no good, a computer can't understand that, we need to come up with a hard definition that everybody can agree on where the lateral starts. It didn't take us long, it was easy, you just set the first survey point to exceed 86 degrees. But having that set in stone, so now the computer can have it, you're able to ensure that ruthless transparency. And since then, all the any sort of animosity or disputes has literally gone away, 0. It doesn't exist anymore. And that way everybody understands on the data that's going into the pipeline where the lateral started, and now you can start doing apples with apples comparisons on large data sets. The last one I want to talk about, and honestly this one's my favorite, I think this is pretty cool. IFS companies, especially the larger ones, are dealing with some fantastic technology, right? So I'm talking about surface logging technologies, downhole technologies. My personal experience was with RSS tools. They're a fantastic data set, especially when they're recorded work. They're able to record high frequency downhole drilling parameters, downhole RPM, downhole flow rate, all at 5 hertz. Historically, these data sets were huge, right? They were a pain in the butt to work with. Operators knew there was value in them, but they were never able to consume that value at scale. Obviously, with the advent of AI, that's all changed. However, this data is still not making it into the operator's data set in a way that they can actually use it. And that's because of this historical process that we still have in place where the operators don't necessarily see the value of these data sets. Okay? What contract, I might add, if they did want to try and extract value from these, the costs associated with that would be significant. Big data sets, you need to contextualize them, you need to demonstrate that these data sets don't have big gaps, they have all the channels you need, all that kind of stuff. And then the operator on the other side is going to take it and be like, yep, I agree with everything. So what we've been able to do with contract automation is we're able to pick up those data sets that would otherwise have remained in the trash, something we're calling dormant data sets. And we're able to process them automatically to ensure that contractually these data sets meet the expectations of the operator. Are the channels named correctly? Are there no gaps, wherever it may be? We pick it up and then we deliver it to wherever the operator needs it to be in their database. Simultaneously, we're able to execute a smart contract to ensure that the operator is remunerated for the value that they're creating from these data sets. That's important. They're not going to give them them for free, especially now that the vendors understand its value of them. But we're able to execute this at a price point that's acceptable to the operator, but also puts enough meat on the bone for the vendor. So essentially, we're able to create a market here for this new data. So, in a simple nutshell, we firmly believe that there's value to come from this AI revolution that's coming down the road. But in order for that to work, we need to make sure that we're able to work within our own organizations, but also our stakeholders, to ensure that the data going in is of the highest quality, of the maximum value possible, without creating unnecessary burden on these people.